Hello again, YouTube. Welcome back. Zach is back. Here again on YouTube, giving you all a much awaited topic, my all-rounders held items guide. This video is going to cover sort of what I define as the all-rounders purpose in the game, sort of the best way to play them. And then from there, talk about what your held items should do for you and the best held items to do those tasks. As ever, I really appreciate all the support. So if you did like the video, please do like it. Share with friends you think might like it. Leave comments, let me know your thoughts. Subscribe for more stuff like this occasionally. I'm trying to upload more regularly in the future, but life's just busy sometimes, So we do what we can, and I hope you guys enjoy it. And yeah, without much further ado, we'll just get into it. So I have brought up on here the all-rounders in Unite database, which is a very useful resource I've mentioned and used many times in the past. And the reason I want to look at this to start with is it gives us a good way of talking about what all-rounders do in the game, and their name really says it all. They're sort of meant to encompass a very versatile playstyle and very versatile strategy, where you're another one of your team's linchpins, like a defender, in that your team plays around you as an anchor and uses you in fights to engage. But unlike a defender, you're usually less bulky, maybe a little more mobile, and usually, pretty much always, much more damaging. All-rounders sort of have a middle ground between attackers and defenders that makes them very unique in their playstyle. But they do have a lot of commonalities. The first of which is that most of them are melee or at least close range. There are a few ranged ones, but even they generally like to be near the people they're fighting. And I would say most all-rounders, the way they function, they sort of play around with three main pivotal factors. The first being survivability, the second being mobility, and the third being burst damage. And you see all-rounders on this page, you can think about how each of them plays with each of those different factors. I think that most all-rounders usually have two of those things they do the most, and the third a little less, but all of them to some extent do all those things. Really good example is Sarah Ledge, who has really good mobility, really good burst damage, but is not quite as survivable as some of the entries on this list. You compare it to something like, let's say, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good example. Sorry. Buswolf. So Buswolf's not always the most mobile, but he's really survivable and he's got really, really good burst damage, right? Oh, another fact that all these guys do is they control fights. They have moves that slow down enemies or stun them very easily or cover very large areas. Point being, your all-rounders make good frontliners, not only because they're more bulky than most Pokemon, but also because they're very good at just dealing damage very efficiently. They're all still ultimately damage dealers, and that is your priority in team fights. A lot of times, the way you're dealing damage, though, is going to be understood differently depending on your perspective. A lot of times, maybe, your damage might not be so high in that... How do I put it? It's not so much that you're dealing all the damage yourself, but because you're tanking a lot in frontline and getting all these stuns and slows, etc., your team is able to add damage to the engagement and safely approach. Your weenie attacker standing behind you who's too weak to approach or walk up without dying, yeah, he has all those damage in the game because of you. So that's part of how you get your damage in team fights, I think. It's not just the numbers you look at the end of the game. There's a broader perspective to look at. That said, with those commonalities in mind, I think that, like attackers, there are a few things that are pretty essential from your items. I think that because you were trying to deal damage, obviously you need some damage items. I do think defensive items are very useful on all-rounders. I think that, I said on all attackers, usually one defensive item is good, but sometimes zero is okay. I think all-rounders you pretty much always want at least one defensive item. If you're playing a Mega or Zacian or something that only has 2 slots, then you can maybe get away with no defensive items. But a word of caution that because you're primarily a melee Pokemon and you're trying to engage Pokemon on the enemy team very closely, the enemy team is going to want to stay away from you, they're going to kite you away, they're going to be attacking you while you're chasing them around. And it's going to make it harder to do your job if you're not going to be able to survive. So defensive items really, really help all-rounders do their job more effectively, and I think are pretty essential. That said, I organized my list here a lot like I did my one for my attackers. Some things are arranged a little differently, and I'll talk about why. But in general, as ever, you'll notice that it's mostly offensive items, largely because, well, most items in the game are offensive. But also, I think that, how do I put it? There's a diverse array of all-rounders that have a diverse array of needs and wants, and it takes a lot of different held items to cover those needs and wants, and lots of unique damage dealers want to deal damage in unique ways. Whereas I think most all-rounders want their defensive utility in the same kind of way, so it makes sense there's fewer defensive options. That said, I think they are still important, and I think all the ones listed here are viable. I also think that if you want to afford some room in your slot for some utility items, you have a few options, not as much as for attackers, I think, because you do want more dedicated defense generally, and that means that your item slots are generally a bit more hamstrung. But a little bit of utility can help here and there, and unlike my other videos, I'm actually going to talk about battle items a little more here, talk about why I think these are the best ones in all-rounders and what other options you can consider. But as ever, I want to give as a preface to all of this, this guide is not telling you what you're supposed to do every game, or how to think, or that you shouldn't think for yourself. I think the best way to learn as a player is to think for yourself. Why would I do this? Why would I use that item? Why would I make that choice? So, as you hear me explain these things, and as you pick your own items, be willing to be introspective and explorative, and try to understand better why these choices are the way they are. And, you know, if you're having a hard time making choices, it can help to have someone tell you, hey, do this is a good idea. So that's part of what this guide is for, but as you improve, you know, be willing to experiment, try different things depending on the match lineup and what you think you might need. You know, be willing to experiment. The game is very diverse and always changing. There's new Pokemon a lot these days, so really, I think it's important now more than ever to be willing to adapt. So, you know, as much as I intend for this guide to help people make choices and feel informed about those choices, take all the advice I give with a grain of salt, in that my game experiences are never going to be the exact same as yours. And yours are completely valid too. But with all that said, I do have a lot of game experience, and I have a lot of knowledge, and a lot of good explanations in mind, so let's get into the list. We'll start with the offensive items, as with before. And you'll notice the top 6 are still the same in my mind. I think that between these 6 items, you want at least one on your Pokemon at all times if you're a damage dealer. Since there's a few special all-rounders these days, I have some special items here I'll talk about as well. But since most attackers are physical, I'll mainly focus on physical items. But in general, if you're stacking, run your stacking items. Those give you the most of whatever your damaging stat is. If you don't want to stack but you still want to scale well, then you run the KO stacking ones, that being Excel Bracer or Drive Lens, which do give you a lot of special attack or attack, but not as much as stacking, score stacking. And then if you need Curse, you can run a Curse item instead, which those both obviously give less than either of the items above them. However, if you're cutting down the enemy's healing by a significant margin, you could be dealing effectively more damage than you would be just by pumping yourself, because as with before, your teammates are doing a lot of damage. So I think even more than on attackers in some cases, all-rounders can consider running Curse items. But again, you know, if you feel like you need one, or you have at least one on your team and you're secure not running one, don't feel obliged to. The other ones do give more damage, so, you know, if you're stacking, go for these, and if you're not stacking, I would say go for these. I can also explain what these items do real quick. I probably should, right? Let me do that, sorry. I did that last time, so I'll do it with this one. Not everyone's seen every video. I was about to say, oh, well, all my items are the same as I talked about in the attackers video, but not everyone's seen that video, so I'm not going to assume things. Excel Bracer gives 15 attack and 4.5% cooldown reduction, and whenever you get an assist or a KO, you get stacks of Excel Bracer up to 20, and at 20, you get 12% extra attack. So every stack gives you 0.6%. So whenever you get an assist, you get 1 stack, that's 0.6%. A KO gives you 2 stacks, that's 1.2%. And once you hit 20, you get the full 12%. And by the way, all these items, I'm reading the stats and everything, assuming they're level 30. If your items aren't level 30, I would say get them to at least level 20 so you get the benefit of it. Obviously, level 30 will have better stats on the item itself, but the effect is really what you want to be focusing on. So getting all your items to at least level 20 is a good starting point for your held items. But anyway, the reason Excel Bracer is so good is 12% attack on most all-rounders is the best boost you can get without attack weight. On a single item slot, that is. On top of that, you get 15 attack from the item itself, not bad, and 4.5% cooldown reduction, which not a lot of items give and is very, very useful on some Pokemon. Especially Pokemon that have dashing moves on low cooldowns, or any other move on a low cooldown. Cooldown reduction is very useful, because in these low cooldown moves, you're spamming them even more, and you're getting more effects from them, which is very useful on certain Pokemon, as we'll talk about later. Drive lens is the same thing for special attack, so it's 24 special attack, and then all the other numbers are the same. Attack weight gives 18 attack, and then upon scoring a goal, increases attack by 12. Max attacks is 6, which gets you 72 attack. So at max stacks, that is 90 attack for those doing math at home. And just to prove what I said what I said earlier is right. The highest special attacker you can do, or the highest I can get on an attacker is Scyther at 630 attack on all rounders. So if we do 630 times 1.12, which is 112% of 630. In other words, your 630 attack plus a fully stacked Excel bracer, 706 attack, right? Whereas a full attack weight gives you 90 attack, that's 720. That's still more. So even on the highest attacker for all rounders, you're never going to get more than what you get from score stacking. So score stacking is always going to be more. However, scoring is really difficult in a lot of games. So if you don't feel comfortable stacking, you don't know how, you don't want to against their Pokemon, then I would say, yeah, Excel Bracer is probably better. And honestly, I think it's better on average in general, because stacking is usually pretty difficult. And the better opponents you're against, the better they'll be at punishing you for trying to stack. They'll waste your time, they'll kill you a bunch, you'll be at the mid-game with still trying to get your stacks done, and they farmed you the whole early game. So you're not really getting the benefit of the items, you're so far behind anyway. And of course, special attack specs is the same, but for special attack, obviously. So this gives you 24 special attack base, and then 16 per stack, up to 6 stacks. So that's 120 special attack when it's fully stacked. Again, higher than the other thing. I show the math as well. We might as well, right? Special attack. Highest is 780. 780 times 1.12. 874. Whereas 780 plus 120 from the special attack specs, 900. So again, no matter how high the special attack is, every Pokemon in the game, I think attackers included, score stacking is always going to get you more. It's just the trade-off of, do you want to spend the game trying to stack? And if not, then the bracers are better, or bracer and lens are better. And honestly, if you're trying to learn a new Pokemon or any new strategy or just understand a new meta, I would say don't add risk to your games and probably stick with a safer option. And then of course I'll explain why Curse is important by reading the descriptions of these items again. Curse Bangle gives 24 attack and attack-based damage dealt to opposing Pokemon, weakens their HP recovery effect by 30% for 1.5 seconds. Also of note, if you deal this damage with an attack, whether basic or boosted, the effect lasts for 3 seconds instead of 1.5 seconds. And then Curse Bangle is the same, or Curse Incense is the same, but 39 special attack, and then this is for special attack-based damage. And the reason it's so important is 30% reduced HP recovery is a big deal against these tank Pokemon that sustain themselves by healing, especially since they have Big Root in the game to help them now. It's really important to run Curse against Pokemon like that, because otherwise you have a really hard time getting rid of them. They're going to just stick around and no one's going to be able to break through their defenses. Curse Bangle, Curse Incense can give your team the chance to actually whittle them down, because they're not going to be healing as much. Granted, your own damage will be less than either of the other items I've talked about in either of those slots, but I think still, it's worth considering Curse if you need it. Aside from those, I would say, again, one of those to consider all the time. And I would say from there, your other slots can be 1 defense, and then if you're looking for 2 offense, you have a lot of choices. You can run 2 of these items if you think 2 is going to be good. Like if you want Curse and you're stacking. Or you could try to stack and do the Bracer / Lens, because that does give you the most attack or special attack of all. Do be advised though that both those items gain their value over the course of the game, and so they're both weaker in the early game. So if you're running both, your early game is going to be substantially weaker. So really be cautious of making your early game too weak. It can be a real problem if you're trying to KO and stack, because sometimes the 2 goals don't really intersect enough unless you're winning a lot. And you're not going to win a lot every single game. You got to be ready for when things aren't going to go well. So if you're looking for something a little more reliable or a little more kitted out to your Pokemon, you have a lot of options. I'll actually talk about the special options first, because there's fewer, because again, there's fewer special attackers. I think there's only 2 special attacking all-rounders. There's yeah, Suicune and Empoleon are the only ones. No other all-rounders in the game are special attacking. So this only applies to them. But I think the best item to consider is Shell Bell, because even though Suicune is ranged, it's still very close range in a lot of cases, and Empoleon, of course, wants to play close up as well. So you're going to be taking hits and trading blows a lot. So the passive healing that you get over time from Shell Bell whenever you hit a opposing Pokemon is going to help a lot. Not to mention, this is one of the few other items in the game that gives cooldown reduction. Really big deal. I would say that makes Shell Bell a really big priority. Your other damage options, just for generic assistance. If you want, I think what's best in the early game, Wise Glasses hits that because it's just percentage-based increase, really, really good. Slick Spoon is really, really good at team fighting against tankier opponents, obviously, because it pierces their defenses. And Choice Specs is good if you are more so hitting over time and trading blows on a consistent basis, where you'll be able to proc this a lot of times in a fight, which doesn't always happen. Sometimes the burst is better with this or this. And I'll of course read again what all these items do to explain a bit more about what I mean. So Shell Bell gives 24 special attack and 4.5% cooldown reduction. When hitting an opposing Pokemon with a move, recovers HP equal to 80 plus 60% special attack, 8-second cooldown. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but as I talked about before on my attacker video, this healing adds up a lot over the course of a full game. The important thing to keep in mind is, because you're constantly going to be fighting ideally, constantly dealing and taking damage, you're constantly going to generate value out of Shell Bell. Over the course of a full game means every fight you're showing up to, you're a little tankier. And that's a big deal, it really is. Especially when you're playing a Pokemon that really does need to be the front line for the team fighter, sort of the anchor of the fight, you know? You want to make sure you're sticking around, so healing is helpful for that. And then for your other generic damage options, Wise Glasses gives 39 special attack and then another 7% special attack. Again, just good flat increase. I think it's better than Spoon early on because it helps you fight wild Pokemon better. Wild Pokemon generally don't have very high defensive stats, so you just want flat damage increase to be able to knock them out faster. Alternatively, you're facing high damage or high defense opponents, like you're against a double defender lineup or multiple all-rounders. Slick Spoon can be really good. Gives 210 HP and 30 special attack, and your special attack based damage dealt ignores 15% of opposing Pokemon's special defense. So against very tanky opponents, this is going to help a lot for mitigating the amount they're reducing your damage. That's a pretty big deal. Like I said, since wild Pokemon generally have lower defensive stats, the special defense piercing won't give as much damage as just the flat, larger increase of Wise Glasses against wild Pokemon. So earlier on, I think this is still better, but this is also very good. This is good in the mid and late game. I think this might be better against defensive lineups. And then Choice Specs is good as well in some cases. Gives 39 special attack, and when damaging an opposing Pokemon with a move, deals 60 plus 40% special attack as an additional damage to the first target hit, 8-second cooldown. So like Shell Bell, it applies every 8 seconds. You'll notice the benefit you get from it is a lot less than the 60%, it's 40%. Doesn't sound like a big deal. It is, I promise you, numbers-wise over the course of the game. But it's still a very useful item. It gives good burst. It can help Pokemon that lack burst damage to help secure KOs or just chunk people down faster. I'd say if you're looking for just good flat damage in the mid-late game, it's probably better than Wise Glasses, but it's not as good in the early game. So again, it's all a matter of what you think your items need to do for you. In the whole game, you want to think about what problems am I going to face and how can my held items solve that problem. So think about that when making your choice between these items. Now, for physical attackers, you have many more options to consider. I think you have 3 primary choices when it comes to attack speed, those being Muscle Band, Rapid Fire Scarf, and Choice Scarf. Muzzle Band gives 15 attack, 7.5% attack speed, and Auto Attack steal 3% of opposing Pokemon's remaining HP as additional attack-based damage. Additional damage is capped at 360. So what this is going to do for you is not only help you attack faster, which is good if you care about your attack speed, it's going to help you chunk down defensive targets or large HP targets much faster, because you're going to get that bonus damage dealt every single attack. And even if you're hitting that damage cap, like against, say, a Regidrago or even a Groudon, still getting 360 extra damage per attack will help a lot with ripping through the boss Pokemon in the early stages of the fight. So it's very, very useful in those ways. I'd say it's probably the best in terms of raw attack speed because the attack speed you gain isn't variable, and the effect itself is very, very strong against large HP opponents, and also just good against objectives, which are in every single game, so it's a very strong item for those reasons. Next I said I would talk about the other the scarves, so we'll talk about those. Rapid Scarf, sorry, I'm all over the place. Rapid Fire Scarf, 12 attack, 9% attack speed. Dealing auto attack damage to an opposing Pokemon adds 1 stack of a hidden buff for 3 seconds, up to 3 stacks. After the 3rd stack, increases auto attack speed by 25% for 5 seconds, 10-second cooldown. So you'll notice this is more attack speed than Muscle Band, and as a variable effect, it gives you way more attack speed as well. So this is technically better raw attack speed than Muscle Band, but I think that the damage boost of Muscle Band is very useful against objectives and large HP opponents. So I think that it's still more generally versatile. But Rapid Fire Scarf isn't bad at all. I'm not saying that. And if you like it better, then, use it, of course. Like I always say, whatever build you should use is the build that works best for you. So if that works best for you, that's great. That said, like I said, it gives you the best raw attack speed. It's mainly going to be useful on Pokemon that care about boosteds, or they heal off their attacks in some way, or anything like that. Which actually reminds me, one of the items I actually forgot to include an item on this list that I'll mention now. If you are a Pokemon that cares about healing off attacks, you might want to consider Drain Crown, which gives 120 HP, 18 attack, and it reads, attack-based auto attacks restore HP equal to 15% of damage dealt to an opposing Pokemon's HP. So if you're a Pokemon that does generate most of their damage from dealing attack damage, Drain Crown is going to be a huge benefit in the fights. So I would say those Pokemon definitely consider this on. I forgot to put it on my list. Oops, but that's okay. Anyway, last but not least about attack speed is Choice Scarf. Gives 7.5% attack speed, 150 speed, and dealing an auto attack for opposing Pokemon adds 1 stack of a hidden buff for 2 seconds, up to 3 stacks. Taking non-movement, non-auto attack actions will reset the stack count to 0. And then after the 3rd stack, increases movement speed by 40% for 3 seconds. So, it gives 7.5%, unlike the 9% of the other Scarf. And the hidden stacks last only 2 seconds, not the 3 seconds of Scarf. And also, they can get removed more easily if you do other stuff. But the benefit you get is better? Different? I don't know if it's better, but it's definitely different. You get 40% movement speed instead of 25% attack speed. So if your target's trying to flee from you, this will really help you keep on top of them. Also helps if you're getting slowed down, anything else like that. But honestly, in all those cases, this item isn't giving you any attack damage, whereas this is, and it gives you attack speed, so this isn't increasing your DPS, whereas this is. So it's a matter of, can you afford to not increase your DPS to have the utility of speed instead of attack speed? And it remains to be seen in many cases, but it's worth mentioning. It gives attack speed. Some people like it very much. It's not a bad item. I don't think it's good as the other attack speed items, but, people have their preferences. Next we have the crit items. We have Razor Claw and Scope Lens. So I'll talk about Scope Lens first, since it's purely deals with critical hits, so it gives plus 6% crit rate, and plus 12% crit damage, and also, upon dealing a critical hit with an auto attack, deals an additional hit of damage equal to 75% attack to one target, 1 second cooldown. And the 1 second cooldown is not really relevant in most cases, just so you don't double crit someone for double Scope Lens bonuses. But double crits aren't very common anyway. They do happen, obviously. But in any case, the point of this item is mainly to just make your crits deal more damage, obviously. But only really helps with your auto attacks for that regard. But for the most part, I think any Pokemon that cares about critical hits does not mind that. So if you're playing a build or a Pokemon that cares about critical hits, this can be very useful. Notable examples is anything with fast attack speed or burst damage, or abilities specifically geared towards crits, like Charizard. Dragonite can be good too. Stuff like that can be nice. And then we have Razor Claw, which boosts your crit rate by 2.1%, so it's useful for crit builds. It also gives 15 attack, and then it has a very unique ability. For 3 seconds after using a move, the next auto attack to damage an opposing Pokemon deals 20 plus 50% attack as additional damage to the first target hit. If held by a melee Pokemon, also decreases the movement speed of the target by 30% for 1 second, 1.5 second cooldown. So you'll notice that the damage buff this gives is pretty similar to the one given by choice specs for for special attackers. I think it's a little better actually, because 50% at the cost of 40 base is usually not bad on a lot of Pokemon. It's not as good on some Pokemon, but it's comparable is the point. You get it on a 1.5 second cooldown though, instead of the 8 second cooldown of choice specs, at the cost that you have to use an ability and then hit your opponent with a melee attack. But obviously, since most all-rounders are physical Pokemon that want to play a melee game plan, Razor Claw makes a lot of sense as an item. So I would say I would definitely consider any Pokemon that has very low cooldown moves they can spam, like I said before, because every time you use a move, you'll get Razor Claw procced within that 1.5 second cooldown. You'll hit it, and the next 1.5 seconds, do it again, and you can really keep a lot of base time and slow people down for those 1 seconds, because if you think about it, a 1 second slow on a 1.5 second cooldown means that they only get to move normally for half a second at a time. It's like half a second normal, 1 second slow, alternating over and over. You could really, just keep someone from escaping. It's a really powerful tool in the hands of some Pokemon. Like I said, any Pokemon with very low cooldown moves or moves you like to spam, anything that you want to be up close in those ways is good. So stuff like Ceruledge, obviously it's really nice on. It can be good on Buzzwole too, Lucario. I've seen it on various other Pokemon like Serena, because you get your moves. You get to use a lot of moves because of the way her passive works. And last but not least, we have Weakness Policy, which the game classes in the defensive items in the client, but I consider it an offensive item just because it only boosts your damage. Gives you 210 HP, so I guess it gives you that as well, but the rest of it is only damage. And 15 attack, and upon receiving damage, increases attack by 2.5% for 3 seconds, up to 4 times, maximum 10%. So whenever you get hit again, it'll refresh the stack duration and apply a new stack until you've hit the max 4 stacks, at which point further damage will just refresh the duration of the stacks. So in a very big team fight, what that means is you're going to constantly be at that 4 stacks because you're in the front lines, you're dealing and taking a lot of damage. So it's just a flat 10% attack boost if you think about it that way. At the cost of having to be someone that's taking a lot of damage, but you're an all-rounder, you're going to do that anyway. So if you're looking at all the items thinking about, well, I just want damage, but I don't need attack speed, and I don't care about crits, and I don't really want to use Razor Claw, and I only want one of these, then Weakness Policy isn't bad, 'cause it's 10%, and you know what? That 10% is as good at the early game as it is in the mid and late game. It's not going to be 10% as often in the early game, obviously, but it's still going to be very good, so I would say it's probably one of the better early game options just for raw damage output, so do consider it in that sense. It's definitely a worthy option. We'll talk about the defensive items next. The top 3, I think, are the best overall. They each have their own sort of niche. And sometimes you may not want any of them if one of the other options here seems a little better to you. So I'll talk about why I think what they each do and how that applies to them being just generally good, and then we'll talk about the ones below that I think are all a bit more specific in their application, but can be good in certain cases. So first up we have Resonant Guard, which you all know is one of my favorite held items. It gives 450 HP and 18 HP regen every 5 seconds. And when you damage an opposing Pokemon, grants the holder and one nearby ally with the lowest current HP a shield for 100 plus 6% of the holder's max HP for 3 seconds, 10-second cooldown. And then additional Resonant Guard shields do not stack, but instead refresh the duration of the remaining shield effect. So, what all that means is if you're dealing and taking damage constantly, you're going to constantly be generating shields for your team that make it so the damage the enemy team is offset, and you're able to deal damage more effectively as a result. And again, this is a nice item because it helps your early game a lot too. That 100 flat does matter in the early game when attacks aren't as strong, and 100 actually can soak up maybe 1 whole or 2 whole auto attacks, maybe even 3 or a boosted. That's a big deal. It really is. It doesn't sound like a lot, but on you and your ally, it means that if either one of you gets use out of it, the item did something, and that's good. And of course, since it scales with percentage of HP as well, it's good in the mid and late game as well. And it gives a lot of HP on its own. It's a very good item for staying alive and helping your teammates. But it's best on Pokemon with higher HP. And as tanky as all-rounders like to be, there are a lot that don't have very good HP. I would say unless you're like 7... I guess most of them are good enough for Resonance Guard, but I'd say these lower HP guys, like maybe Aegis down, you probably don't want to run it on, but it could still be okay. It's just all depends on the game state. That's really the truth of it. Next is Focus Band, probably the most commonly used one, and for good reason. It gives 30 special defense and defense, and when below 25% HP, recovers 12% missing HP 3 times over 3 seconds, once every 1 second, 80-second cooldown. So it's a very long cooldown effect, but it's very, very good at regenerating lost HP very quickly, which can help you stay alive and really helps all the defense you're getting as well. Notably, this works very well on Pokemon with the Torrent, Blaze, or Overgrow abilities, anything like that, where you deal more damage at lower HP, or Pokemon with healing abilities, because it'll give you more time to be able to heal, and you probably have other healing synergy anyway, so the Focus Band is good in that sense. The sort of one weakness of the item is that the ability has a kind of long cooldown, so when it's on cooldown, it's just 30 defense and special defense, so maybe you want something that's a bit better without that ability, and it's just better on average in general. Then you could look at Tenacity Belt, one of the newer items to be added to the game, which gives 30 defense and special defense, and has the effect when a hindrance is inflicted on the Pokemon's defense and special defense are increased by 28% for 3 seconds. 20% is a lot, and 3 seconds is a decent amount of time to get that effect. So especially against lineups where most of the Pokemon will have ways to hinder you, this can generate a lot of defense over the course of the game, which helps you stay alive really well. May perhaps be even better than Focus Band in that sense, because you're getting the defense benefit proactively instead of waiting for this long cooldown ability to kick in. But against lineups that don't have a lot of hindrances, you're not going to get the effect proc very often, and so it'll just be the stats, as we talked about with Focus Band earlier. So all of these items have a trade-off in some way. None of them are perfect, but they're all very useful in general. So that's why I consider them the cream of the crop. But if you have other needs, wants, or uses in mind, I think there are 4 other options that are all very viable as well. So we'll talk about those. First of all, if you're stacking, you should always consider Ao's Cookie, I think, which gives 240 HP, and upon scoring a goal, increases max HP by 200 up to 6 times. So at 6 stacks, you get 1440 HP, which, again, if we look at these stats, is a lot of HP on some of these Pokemon. It gets these guys up to 9,000 HP. This is like Defender levels. It gets these guys past Defender levels. They're like Blissey levels. It gives a lot of HP. I think that there's a reason people will often stack both, but it's not necessary. I think sometimes maybe there's other defensive items you want, or you have other options in mind for how you want to play your game, or maybe you're not stacking at all, so you don't really think the cookie is viable, and that's fine too. But if you are stacking, it's a very good option to consider. Past that, if you are against a primarily physical team, you may want to consider Rocky Helmet, which gives 270 HP and 51 defense, only physical defense, very, very high. Upon receiving damage equal to 3% max HP or more from an opposing Pokemon in a single hit, deals 1.5% of the holder's max HP as attack-based damage to nearby opposing Pokemon, 6-second cooldown. So, this item is good against mainly physical teams for 2 reasons. 1, 51 defense, very, very huge. And 2, as we talked about, most all-rounders are physical and most all-rounders are melee Pokemon. So most of the time, your enemy physical attackers are going to be near you. So they're going to take a lot of damage from this Rocky Helmet as they're fighting around you. So it helps a lot against winning the damage race against those Pokemon, making it so they don't gain as much from fights as they would like to gain. That's a big deal when you're fighting teams that are trying to overwhelm you with damage. Conversely, if you're playing against a primarily special lineup, you may want to consider Assault Vest, which gives 270 HP, 51 special defense, and, when not in combat for 5 seconds, grants a 20% max HP shield effect that nullifies special attack-based damage until it is destroyed. So again, 2 main reasons it's good against primarily special lineups. And to explain, when I say primarily physical, primarily special, I mean 4 or more. If there's just 3, I probably wouldn't consider either of these items, but if you think they're good enough, sure. I would personally not. But in any case, against primarily special lineups, this gives you 51 special defense, huge against them, and essentially plus 20% max HP, because if all their damage is special, then every fight you show up with an Assault Vest shield, you're going to always have 20% extra HP, which is, like, Like this shield, I was talking about how good it was on Resonant Guard. That's 6% shields. That's 12%. And this is 20%. You just show up, you already have it. Whoa, jeez, that's so good. And if you can take no combat damage for 5 seconds, you get it back. So you can weave in and out perhaps and make use of it like someone with Regenerator or Leftovers would. Very, very cool stuff in my book. But only against primarily special lineups. Otherwise, I wouldn't consider it. And last in the realm of defense, we have Big Root, which gives 450 HP and gives 20% extra self-healing. So if you're a sustain-based all-rounder, you're someone that wants to stay in the fight by healing themselves, this item is very good for you. So stuff like Scissor can be good on, Phalanx or Aegislash in some cases, Azumarill in some cases. There's a lot of options, honestly, but I would say, again, don't do only defense. Make sure you have some offense, because if you run Big Root and 2 defense items like I've seen sometimes, oh boy, you're not going to get a lot of healing. Because all your healing effects on these Pokemon are based on the damage you deal, right? So you want to make sure you're dealing more damage. So always make sure you got one of these. And then one of these is also good. In most cases, sometimes you can get away with not running it, but do be advised that that can be very risky. And then utility options, I think all-rounders have the least. Again, because they're trying to survive in frontline while also dealing damage, so they kind of need their item slots for other things. But oftentimes, some utility can be useful in certain games and on certain teams, and maybe you just like these items and what they do and want to run one utility with 1 offense and 1 defense, which can be cool. I think the king crown of utility is always the experience share. If you are playing a game or a lane where you think your lane partner needs XP more than you do, and you can get away with being a little under-leveled in the early game, this item can help you a ton with making sure your team gets more overall XP out of the game. Again, it has a very complicated effect, so I'm not going to explain it all in this video. I've got an experience share video that I will link at the end, so check that out. But in any case, I think that it helps a lot just for getting your team more experience overall, so don't be afraid of using it and check out that experience share video if you don't know why. Lastly, if you're score stacking, that is to say attack weight, special attack specs, and or Aeos cookie, I think you have 2 other options to consider. The first is Score Shield, which gives 450 HP, and when you're trying to score a goal, you get a shield that prevents scoring from being interrupted until the shield is destroyed or the goal is scored. And this ability of getting that shield has a 20-second cooldown, so you don't get it every time you score, just once every 20 seconds. And this shield will be destroyed before other shields, so even if you have other shield effects, if they try to stop you from scoring, this one will always go away first, so do be aware of that. But it is a good shield. It gives 30 plus 10% max HP plus 30 times your level minus 1. So kind of a wonky equation. But essentially what it's doing is giving you a 10% and change max HP shield when you try to score. So these goals can't be prevented. It makes it easier to score. So if you're stacking, it helps a lot. And I would say that if you're playing either of these items that are only about scoring, make sure you're stacking, because otherwise you're not getting the full benefit out of them. You're trying to make it easier to score and more reliable that you can score. You want to make sure you're getting something more out of it just than points, if you can. So something like attack weight or special attack specs, and even you could consider Aeos Koki, can altogether really help make sure you're getting the most out of that game plan. And the other option in that vein is Amulet Coin, which gives 240 HP, 150 speed, and gives 100% extra Ace energy for defeating wild Pokemon every 20 seconds, like the Score Shield cooldown. And your goal scoring speed is 10% faster. So, obviously the goal scoring speed boost does make it easier to score, so if you're stacking, it helps with that, which is part of why I mentioned it. But it also gives you more points to score, which can help just in winning the game, because the game's all about scoring points, right? Like, at the end of the day, you can carry the enemy team 100 times, but if they score more, they still win. So Amulet Coin in some cases can be very useful for just getting your team more points scored over the course of a long game. Do be advised that trying to score a lot does have downsides. Yeah, the enemy team will get wise to your antics and will likely defend more ardently. So you want to make sure you're not dying too often, especially if you are trying to stack, so keep all that in mind. But this can help a lot. All that said, we'll talk briefly about the battle items. So, obviously, when we're talking about burst damage, mobility, survivability, as the three main attributes of all-rounders, I think that the best way to maintain all those together is going to be whatever battle item helps unite them. So what that's going to look like in most cases is something that's versatile and solves a lot of the Pokemon's problems. A lot of Pokemon, for instance, use eject button because they don't have very good movement, or they sometimes like a way to jump away from Pokemon because they don't want to be right next to Pokemon. Or, in the case of someone trying to chase their opponents, you can jump on top of them or even jump over walls to help chase them more easily. So eject button can be good on all-rounders where that's true of, so in that sense it would be helping with mobility and survivability, and potentially burst damage because you can chase people down easier. Full heal, again, helps in all three similarly because it buys you that short window of time where the enemy's attacks and abilities and everything don't hinder you. So you'll be able to actually use your movement options or damage options or just survive a team fight to do what you need to do. Potion, HP restoration helps with staying alive long enough to use your things, helps with your options, and XP is a lot like eject button. So again, I think all four of these items do the best job of covering those three aspects of the all-rounder game plan. You can consider other options if you want, but again, all of that is always up to personal application. These guys are always meant to be a starting point, never a finishing point, you know? I always like for my viewers and everyone at home to think for themselves and have a good time learning as well. But anyway, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching once again. I will very likely be streaming a short while after this video goes online, so check the description for a link to the Twitch channel. Give me a follow, really appreciate the support. And yeah, don't really have much else. Thank you all so much for watching. Peace.